everyone, and welcome to Heal a Sister. Heal a Sister is a show that aims to bring hope and restoration to a young woman. My name is Amgalang Matlabi, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about gender-based violence. And to help us unpack today, we have in studio Maungo Mazunga, a psychologist by profession. Hello, Maungo.
Hi, Amo.
Lovely to have you here today. Thank you for being with us. We are talking gender-based violence. I don't want to assume that we all know what that means. So I'm going to ask you to start with the definition of what gender-based violence is. And moreover, how does one know that they're being violated?
All right. Gender-based violence is, in the simplest definition, and I'll get into the unpacking and all of that, is violence that is directed towards a person on the basis of their sex, biological sex, or their gender identity. Yeah. And this happens at three important levels: the structural level, the interaction level, and an identity level. Okay. And for gender-based violence to be defined properly, there is no how we can leave the basis of gender and the power dynamic between the person, two people in the situation, whom is the person to which the violence is being directed, and the person who's directing the violence towards another person themselves. Yes.
Yes. So now how does one know that they're being violated?
Okay, before I go there, sometimes people use the words gender-based violence synonymously with violence against women, VAW, but that is not the case because gender does not necessarily equate to women only. This means it can happen to both men, women, and the gender non-conforming communities. So it is very important for people to understand that gender isn't just a female connotation or word that's only directed towards women, because this would make the context of gender-based violence very irrelevant in our case, because we're not only going to talk to violence that's directed towards women. Right. Now, may you kindly ask the question again? I sort of
You're already deep into it.
Yes.
The question is, how do you know that you're being violated? Right. We tend to talk about gender-based violence a lot of times. For a lot of people, it's a topic that is always talked about, but we never really bring it down to what exactly it is. How do you identify that you're being violated, and how can you identify that it is gender-based violence?
All right. I'll also go back to the basics. Gender identity was one of the phrases I used when I started. Now, when you walked into this room, when I walked into this room, we didn't leave our identities behind. We came with our multiple identities: Christian, heterosexual, any other identity that a person holds. And within a structure, back to the three components that are raised, there's always, a person carries within a structure both privilege, and within that privilege there are also subjugations. Privilege is something that you have that makes you have an upper hand. And then subjugation is a devalued identity that you carry with you. Between a worker who is a superior and their co-worker, the supervisor has an upper hand. They have that privilege. And then the subordinate has the less privilege as compared to their supervisor, right? So now going back to how do I realize that this is gender-based violence? We all have basic human rights. And we know when our basic human rights are being violated. At every point you go, whether you're working in a street, you have the right to feel safe and secure. And sometimes, because of the certain environment or structure that you're in, you can find yourself feeling unsafe. Sometimes it can be because of a certain power that somebody has or holds up against you. Maybe say you are with your supervisor at work, and the supervisor who happens to be male or female. I'll use both examples so that it hits home. Because this is, as I've said earlier, not going to be just violence that's perpetuated towards women only. But I also wanted to hit home.
Yeah.
So say the supervisor just calls you around 10. It can be male, female. It's a male supervisor calling a female supervisor at 10. Or the female supervisor calling a male subordinate at, an unusual, I'll say unusual work hour, right? And because they've had that, this supervisor comes back to work and is like thinking that this thing has changed and is like, hey, you, and starts to treat this person differently. And just because I answered your call yesterday and today I'm not, I'm just in work and I'm not even supposing like this. And then say the supervisor just comes and then tries to hug me or does something that's uncomfortable, that makes me feel unsafe and uncomfortable. As simple as that is also gender-based violence, because there's so many forms of gender-based violence, and most of the times we speak to the physical ones, such as slapping another person, such as rape is one of the commonly spoken about violences. But there are other forms of gender-based violence that we seldom speak to, such as economic violence, such as psychological violence. And for today's conversation, I want the scope of violence to be just this broad and contextual. I want it to be very relevant to a person that's home, because whenever we think of gender-based violence, we're just thinking, he has to touch me in an uncomfortable way, or she has to, or she has to slap me, or no. We also want to speak to those subtle forms of gender-based violence that are there. Yes.
I like that you talk about, the slapping and what we see as gender-based violence, or rather what we're exposed to. We tend to think that gender-based violence, for us to identify it, is that it needs to be reported. We need to see it. We need to see that, or rather we need to, what we think is, because someone has died, this is the extent at which GBV can get to. And then we see it as gender-based violence, but that's just at the extent, right? And then we see it as, like you said, rape. Yeah. We see rape, and then we see someone that's badly beaten up, right? And for someone is sitting and they're thinking, this is what gender-based violence looks like. And I like that you brought up the example of someone calling you to work in at awkward times, right? It just shows that it happens at different levels. Right. So measuring gender-based violence, it's something that we do. Someone is watching this, right? And they're thinking, my friend or this particular person slaps me and it's nothing. I've seen worse. And that is gender-based violence. This cannot be gender-based violence, right? Or my boss calls me at 10 and nothing really happens there. You understand? Why do we tend to measure? Why do we tend to think that it's only gender-based violence when it's reported or when it looks a particular way?
Okay. Previously, and this is as far as gender-based violence programming is centered. Yeah. Most of the times we are thinking of gender-based violence towards risk mitigation, like what do we do to prevent gender-based violence for starters. Let's provide more lights if the girls and the boys go camping so that, everybody's visible and seen at every point. Let's provide more gender-segregated, lockable bathrooms so that males know where to go, females know where to go, and center this around the primary, like dealing with the root causes of what gender-based violence is. Yeah. But we also seldom deal with what would later be the tertiary prevention for the mitigating factors for gender-based violence, which is now how far does it go when the effects of gender-based violence go unreported? And also, how does it help the survivor? I will not use victim in this context. How does it help the survivor who is out there with that untold story at home, seeing something that is happening to whether that context or somebody else, and is just thinking, this is just a mere thing. Yeah. And this also deconstructs back to how from our societal structure, as I've mentioned structure earlier, how we're taught to unpack things, the level of consciousness that is raised around what is violence itself and what we as society understand gender-based violence to be. And we seldom really do unpack what gender-based violence is. For most people, when this topic is spoken about, most people feel, oh, it's not relevant to me.
Yeah.
I'm not being slapped. I'm not being all of those things that we see, which seem to be the extreme side. And this also shows a level of how has our construction of what has to be deemed as violence before it's even gendered, has to be in society, and to what level does one have to speak out towards forms of violence before they're even gendered, whether or not it seems like a trivial thing or it doesn't. And this speaks to our social norms, as in how we're raised.
Yeah.
Monagale is one of the simplest social norms we have in our society. But do you know how painful and gruesome that is? That goes to an extent that if a man also is slapped by a woman, they'll be like, this is just nothing.
Yeah.
She slapped me.
Yeah.
But it has to be, she slapped me.
Yeah.
Like that. It has to be alarming.
Yeah.
Because this is a violation of your human right.
Yeah.
It makes you feel insecure to walk into a room and know that this person, triggered or not, they can slap me.
Yeah.
And that should make me feel insecure in a way. But if I don't realize the extent to what that is, it also means something about me to an extent of in what mental state am I?
Yeah.
Because as a victim / survivor, because at first it starts off, you need to acknowledge, before you move to being the survivor, it starts off acknowledging where you currently are.
Yeah.
And sometimes you move to a place where you're like, it was just nothing. I probably done something for this person to be reacting in this way, to try to justify why things are happening that way, which doesn't have to be the case. So it really does show a level to which the level of consciousness that is raised towards gender-based violence within our societies to this day is still not enough. And we need to do more. And it also speaks to the psychological part that how are we as a society to normalize and make this a culture of, no, it's my mom, because, it's my mom, and, maybe it's because she went through X and Y when she was growing up. That's why she is lashing out this way. It's my boss, probably she was frustrated. The sympathy for the perpetrator. Or it's my boyfriend. I shouldn't have been talking to that boy in the first place. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. And then I try to rationalize it to my point and pity them. And then, before I know it, it's something else more than just the slapping. Because the slapping just shows that it can go more. But for somebody else, it's like, it's just a slap, and then it's just buried in the hands of time.
We're going to take a break right now. We'll be back. Welcome back to Healer Sister. We're still talking about gender-based violence, and in studio we still have Maungo Mazunga. We spoke earlier about how and what gender-based violence is, in terms of what it is, we've identified it, and what form it can come into. Now, Maungo, I want to now extend to where gender-based violence actually happens. We've spoken about that it happens in the workplace in one of your examples. We've spoken about, you also brought out camps, and that really interested me because we talk about gender-based violence as it is something that just happens in the world, and it's something that really affects us because we tend to think that being in the church, it's so safe. Nothing can really come out of this. And yet we experience, or we have a lot of victims that suffer gender-based violence in the church. In the church, it happens in our settings, right inside the church building itself, in our camps, and all these other places, and in different forms and in that different ages.
Yeah, like you have said, violence can happen everywhere. And the same thing also happens for gender-based violence. It can even happen in the comfort of our homes, which is something we tend to shield a lot. It does happen in church as well, as you've said. It happens almost everywhere, even when
Yeah.
you walk in a public space, such as just walking to get a combi or walking to your nearest convenience store or anything. It really shows how gender-based violence can happen almost everywhere, whether you are thinking about whether it will happen to you or not. Because most of the times, the reason why maybe people brush it off, it's just that it happens when you maybe least expect. Yeah. For instance, you mentioned the church as one of the places where gender-based violence can happen.
Yeah.
And we think of church mostly as a safe space.
A safe space.
You go to church, you want to be closer to God, you want to be in fellowship with the brethren, and the least thing you're thinking is to have any form of gender-based violence projected towards you.
Yeah.
And we have cases of sexual harassment within the church. We have people who come from home with cases of domestic violence from home to the church. And then sometimes those people are not even open enough to speak on such. You just come to church and we're okay. Everything is good. If God is for us, who can be against us? And, the Lord is good all the time. And we just shield it, sit in church, and then we go back home to our safe space again, which is the home. And then this gender-based violence is still perpetrated towards the victim.
Unfortunately, what it has happened is that we then shy away from church. Church is a safe space. You talk about home, you talk about church. We like to be in church because this is where we find the real restoration. Now, when we talk about safe spaces, we also want to include church because we love to be there. It's safe to be there. Now, it's unfortunate that when such abuse happens in church, it keeps us away from church, right? And moreover, when it does happen to us, we live in the abuse, okay? We go to church, you're still abused. It doesn't end, and we suffer in the church, and that is really bad, right? So perhaps there's someone that's watching today and they're staying away from church because of this abuse. Or maybe they just find themselves going to church, yet they know they have perpetrators in the church. They have people that are just downsizing them every time, and they're not able to become who they truly are, who God wants them to be in that setting.
As you were speaking, a lot of scenarios are coming to my head right now.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I wanted to speak to was church is a safe space. And in my head, I'm like, should be, because it can happen that the violence is perpetrated within the church premises. And the most common one, as I've said earlier, is sexual harassment. And first of all, let me start here that it's a sin to violate another person. Even the scripture itself says that vengeance is for the Lord. So it serves no purpose really that any man, and men here, it's me using this word for human being, should not find it fit within themselves to perpetrate violence towards another person. And then the other thing that I found myself thinking of is back to the issue of power dynamics, because sometimes you find out that the very same person you could be reporting to or feeling safe with is the very same person within the church structure that's perpetrating the violence towards you. I mean, imagine a leader in the church.
Yeah.
And also imagine me having to speak out that the elder X and Y is doing this towards me, and I'm a young woman in church and thinking, how will that even look? I mean, how does that even begin to sound? To cut it off, maybe this man is also married, or this woman is married within the church
You
context.
already think that you'll suffer an embarrassment of some sort.
So you just choose to mask it and just carry it with you, which is very unsafe. And it brings me to the point that how do we ourselves within the church, as a community within the church, as brethren, as people who fellowship together, find it within us to have a spirit of just taking up on one another. Because when you really know how a person is, how they behave, when a person starts to show the symptoms that just don't look like who they are, you can see that, no, today Maungo looks withdrawn. When Maungo approaches so and so, she just looks, you know, a little bit tense. And we can only see those if we notice. But how many times do we sit in silence and try to just notice what's really going on around us?
Check up on a sister.
Check up on a sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh. It's very unfortunate that, you know, I know that there's a lot of young women that have left because of abuse. I know that a lot of young women are choosing to stay out, and they've even found it okay for them to even speak about this abuse, and that they didn't get any help from us in the church. Everywhere they find an opportunity to do it. It could be on social media. Oh, I was at this church and this is how they treated me, and I decided to leave. And you know, when someone has already suffered in silence and now they're taking it out and they're speaking about it outside, and for everyone to know that this is a problem that we are failing to assist
address,
it, to address, you know, it really breaks my heart. Now, we have women like that who are suffering, and obviously men who are also suffering the same way in our church, and it's become very uncomfortable. I like that you talk that it's an evil sin and vengeance is for the Lord. Yes. And now I want you to talk to a sister that's home and that is feeling the same way. I would like for you to give some encouragement to this sister to come back, you know, and not just come back because it's easy for you to say, come back to the church, you know, just don't drag yourself to the church, but find yourself inside. How can you find help within yourself, and just reaching out to God and finding a healing from just that source?
All right. First of all, it's very important for me at this point to say that even the healing process itself, going through that part, as the series is called, Healer Sister.
Yeah.
You know, healing is not even linear. I think I'm okay today.
It's not?
It's not linear. It's not like a straight line. I think that I'm doing well today, and then tomorrow I wake up and I'm at rock bottom
And it cannot
again.
happen like this.
It doesn't happen like
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
Which also speaks to you need a lot of support.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we feel like being vulnerable, whether with yourself or the next person, is one of the hardest things to do, which is true. But then I think people need to think of it in this way, that perhaps you should realize that vulnerability is a power that you need to treasure within yourself.
Yeah.
And the reason why when somebody does a particular thing to you, you feel alarmed, triggered, happy, sad, it's just that's your systematic way of letting you know that I'm displeased or I'm pleased in this situation.
Yes.
And you are also the same individual who's able to have a conversation with God, taking everything down, saying, God, this is within me and this is very uncomfortable. Because sometimes we think of violence just as an external thing. And when we do think of violence just as an external thing and not something that also affects internally who we are as individuals, that's us just, you know, diminishing the extent to which violence can grow. Because one of the most long-term effects of violence is trauma.
Yeah.
And you know what trauma does to people? Can be socially socially withdrawn from people for a very long period of time.
Yeah,
when you sit within a certain group of people, you just feel as if I don't belong, yeah?
So the healing cannot be abrupt.
So it cannot. It takes a long period of time. So which means you have to be very patient with yourself and also be very patient with the sister, because you can never simply understand. I can be dealing with something that happened to me 10 years ago, and to this day, I think of it and it brings some level of hurt to me. Though I've went through therapy, though I've went through counseling for a very long period of time, and then still, just one of those days, I wake up and I feel blue again, because this is a process that doesn't seem to help.
Yeah.
And then also to recognize, to say that sometimes our ways of GBV approaches entail focusing more on the perpetrator, the person who's done harm or violated another person. But we also seldom look onto what I've been speaking to, the long-term effects that has on the survivor or victim, and also thinking on the feet of the perpetrator themselves. What is causing this person to behave in this light? Because that moment you display a certain character, it already speaks to the internal states that were within you before you even did that act that you are doing. Sometimes in the law, they say some things were premeditated because sometimes you really think that this person has been hurting me, therefore I must.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's a valid reason for a person to act like that towards another.
Yeah.
But some people just say, I've been feeling so defenseless and disempowered for a long period of time, therefore I will. So it also calls us to look onto another, including the perpetrator themselves.
Yeah.
Why is it that violence happens in the first place? Now, to bring it to context, why is it that gender-based violence does happen in the first place? Yeah.
I like that you talk about finding counseling, seeing a psychologist, and also I think it's also important to tap into, your faith, or tap into other people's faith if you can, like seeing a sister. It's important for us to see that we can pray with you. Moreover, encourage you to pray for yourself, be there for you in all forms and all sorts of ways that might be needed for the other person. Encourage to do counseling, encourage to see someone, to see a psychologist. And those are many ways, besides the many other forms that a person can get help besides. And I'm happy to say that we have a program in the church. It's called End It Now. It's a global initiative that aims to raise awareness in the global church about issues of violence. If you need any help, please visit www.enditnow.com. Thank you so much for being here with us, Maungo, and for allowing yourself to be used so greatly by the Lord. Take care. This is Healer Sister. Until we see you again next time. Bye-bye.